Hello there, this is Claire Boscott and welcome back to my new interview with the experts, the mystery shopping expert, just not any type of expert, mystery shopping experts. And today we have Nick Lygo-Baker. Is that the right way? Am I saying it the right way? Lygo or Lygo?
Yeah, Lygo is how I'd say it.
Lygo, right. With my French accent, I know I always think something wrong with the name. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Yes, very well. Nice to be with you today.
Good. Well, I think you and I share a lot of passion together, aren't we?
Yeah, as I was saying before, mystery shopping is my route into CX, so it holds a very dear place in my heart and is really important to me as a measurement tool.
Yeah, so funny enough, behind you have your logo, which is Paradigm, yes?
ParadigmCX.
ParadigmCX. So again, we met each other kind of on social media through the kind of CX world and CX community. And you posted a really good blog a few weeks ago, which had quite a lot of interest. Just tell us a little bit about that blog, because that was very interesting. And that's where we kind of started communicating. And I thought, I must have you on my show.
Yeah, for me, there's lots of touch points and lots of ways of measuring customer experience. And I think a lot of organizations forget that there's more than just a voice of customer or a mystery shopping tool in order to learn more. So I wanted to highlight the fact that for me, there were 5. So there was voice of customer, clearly. There is mystery shopping as a voice of service. You then have a voice of your employee. So it's important to understand how your employees feel about this. But then it's also to understand, what the voice of the process is, what's the business and your sort of management and business information, how that connects together. And for me, it was important to highlight that all of those exist, but you really only get the true view and holistic view of everything once you combine all of those together. And to make that work, you have to build them together. You can't build them in isolation. You can't have them owned in different parts of an organization. Otherwise, they only serve the purpose for the person who set that up. And I see a lot of organizations do that. They, perhaps mystery shopping might sit in operations because we want to test the process, but voice of customer sits in marketing because it's about the customer voice, and the two are very interconnected. And then the third core for me is the voice of employee. So without linking those 3 together at the start, you can easily misunderstand what you're hearing back, and the insight is harder to interpret and then do something with.
And again, so the employees, the voice of the employee sits with the HR. So again, another department, and it makes it really difficult, isn't it? When we talk about CX, when we talk about ECX, employee and customer experience, it really is putting them both in the middle of the businesses. So it's not one department, but it's everybody working on that same, which comes back to your voice of the company, I guess.
Yeah, we all understand the process and the business information, what the sales numbers, that's clearly important, but that should be a byproduct of all of the other activities for me. And even when we talk about voice of employee, more often than not, it's, do you feel that you're getting paid enough? And do you like your boss? It's not, do you think that the way we do things is working with our customers? Are we making it easy for you to do your job in the way that enables you to achieve what you're looking to do? And it's that type of engagement, which is very similar to a voice of customer approach, that I don't think the voice of employee is really getting right just yet. It's heading in the right direction. There's a lot of people like us that are, flying that flag and taking that message through, but it's only starting to filter into the actual programs themselves.
Yes.
But it will happen, and as you do, you start to tighten that grip, or close that gap between the expectations of your employees on what customer experience is, and the employee and the customers, experience themselves and what their expectations might be of your organization.
So just to come back to the topic of this little show, it is about mystery shopping. So tell me now, you've got your own company. What's mystery shopping to do with you?
It's still a really important measurement tool.
How do you get to do it?
So when I started my career, I did a retail management degree. I went into e-commerce and effectively product distribution and category management.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, well, what's that got to do with customers? But of course it has everything to do with customers. It was at the forefront of things like you're working with companies like Play.com and Jungle, that was then absorbed into Amazon. Woolworths at the time had books online, and Virgin Megastores, as they were, Tower Record, all had these e-commerce platforms. And they were developing things like buy one, get one free, which in a retail store was relatively straightforward, but online was a really difficult thing to achieve. But then all of a sudden you start to say, well, we've got 6 million people hitting a website to buy a CD or a video game. That's different to a retailer having 6 million people visit and who might browse 1 meter drop of CDs. So all of a sudden you start to think, well, we've got a captive audience that is the same level of footfall as you would see in a reasonable retailer. How do you make their experience really good? Because you haven't just got 40 products to show them. You've got 40,000 products they could navigate through. So all of a sudden, and that was really the kind of birth of UX in a way.
Yes.
Let's take this thing over here, which has existed for many, many years, called customer experience, and start bringing it into the way in which we navigate online and how we do shopping. So that's where my sort of link in started. But then I joined a very small startup called Retail Eyes. I say very small. It became arguably the largest mystery shopping agency in the UK. Before it was bought by Market Force Information. But it was pioneering, and it for me it answered both of those callings, one around the customer and the customer experience, because it was very customer experience focused, but secondly it was all about innovation and technology. It was, how do you make the user experience really good for the mystery shopper in order to get the best level of insight and information back to the organization. And it wasn't just about how do you manage the shoppers and the shopper management platform. It was actually just as much about how do you capture the information? What's the experience like of going through and completing the questionnaire, adding photos, and then ultimately video and other and audio tools. But also, how do you then take that back to the organization? How do you disseminate this information? So it was one of the first kind of embedded platforms that enabled organizations to get their insights to their store manager and to every employee in a way that was that they could use it. It wasn't just balanced scorecard. It was, here's a list of very clear actions that you can take to improve your delivery of the service we want you to do.
Yeah, I think the meaningful way is always, it's very important as well, how, the visits, it's good to be done and get that information, but actually if it's not easy to access, if it's not easy to read, if the managers or the branches or whoever's in charge of looking at it won't do anything with it, because it doesn't bring them any real value, doesn't it? So that's really important when.
Yeah, and at that time, mystery shopping was a stick to beat people with, and we took this approach of, this should be an incentive and a carrot. We want to catch people doing things right. We didn't want to catch people doing things wrong.
Yes.
And the history of mystery shopping, it's 1940s, I think, was first mystery shopping sort of emerged, and that was about employee integrity. It was about seeing whether employees are taking a bit of change, stick it in your pocket, or whether they're giving the customers, we talk about baker's dozens and things like that from the 17th century. All of these little things that were driven by policy led to this industry that we call mystery shopping. And it started off being a check and balance. Do we trust our employees to do what we've asked them to do? And how do we stop them doing it if they're not? And that's where it started. But we very quickly learned that people respond far better to positive encouragement than they do to being beaten up. So the ethos, I think, from a Retail Eyes perspective, was very much around driving that positive behavior, recognizing and rewarding. So every program we created, we had an incentive plan. We had a 100% certificate if you got a maximum score. If somebody was called out by the mystery shopper as giving exemplary service, we created an award mechanism for that. So we really drove that employee engagement through to make sure that program had value. And in turn, what that did was mean that people wanted to be shopped. They wanted to see if they could find the mystery shopper, and they wanted to give them the best services. as possible. And it is fairly easy to do, particularly if you've got somebody from, I don't know, England going into a Scottish shop, because you have to go to we couldn't get that shop filled. But 99 times out of 100, the shoppers were local, and they might even be normal customers to that store. So it was very difficult for the staff to find the mystery shopper. So what we found is that it then created a spike of positive service, because the store were like on tenterhooks. We've got to get this right. We will serve everybody with the type of service that we should be giving. Now, of course, companies that just did a mystery shop every quarter, if they got their report, then they would just go, okay, we've done it now, we can relax. And the service that exactly that checkbox, it's so we encouraged our clients to do not just more frequent visits, because obviously more data creates more learning, but also to include things like joker visits or random tests. So there was always something that might keep dropping in and keeping customers, keeping those employees on their toes. And it was that just kept that service improvement moving, and led to positive change in those organisations.
And I think I've only been for 11 years running my own business, but even in that time, I saw the difference as well. From right at the beginning, we were quite, answering questions, yet those yes or no questions, where now the last few years, it's been very much about the emotional connections and how did you feel about this, and how, because that experience is a connection, isn't it?
It is, and that's where voice of customer would typically step in, because you get more response from a greater number of people giving you that intangible feedback, and they are your genuine customers that you haven't given instructions to. And I think that's where mystery shopping, obviously you want consistency of measurement in mystery shopping, so you tell people what to go and do. So what you don't get is that natural kind of navigation that a customer would go through with an employee, because the shopper is always in the back of their head going, right, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. So they miss some of those things, and that's where sort of dovetailing the two types of program together really does add value. But that said, a mystery shopping tool doesn't have to be an audit. It doesn't need to be just a handful of 50 shoppers going out and testing everything and going through with a checklist and saying, yes, this is all correct. Where possible, having a broader shopper panel means you can get people who are closer to your natural shopper to go in. A, they're harder to pick up, but B, they're also more likely to give you that human response, and not just the, yes, I went through the process and it felt okay. It's, I went through the process, and with my shopper or customer head on, I was still able to see how that would make me feel if I was a customer, and where I would want things to be changed, as opposed to the brand standard says this and they did it, or they didn't, or this is how far away they were from getting it right. That's important to an extent, but you're right, the value really comes from the manner in which the service is delivered, not just whether they deliver the service or tick the box. It's, because it's very easy for somebody to just go, for example, in a restaurant scenario, and I'm sure everyone's experienced it, where 2 minutes later someone goes back, everything all right with that? And then they walk off, and it's like, well, I haven't even said yes or no yet, and you're so far away you can't hear me. So, but that's just ticking a box. In stationers, it's like, buy a newspaper for 20p. Do I want a £5 bar of chocolate? Not really. The value disparity is too great for me to step up to that level of upsell, and it's not relevant. So that people just miss the ethos of why these programs exist. But those who get it right, and who really encourage their employees to embrace the purpose of these programs, really start to see improvement in their performance and ultimately their bottom line. And it's really encouraging when they do, and that's where, for me, that's the magic sparkly dust that really excites me about when these programs can actually have value for people.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yes, absolutely. And I think that's the thing as well. I think with a mystery shopper, when we talk about a customer experience, a strategy, a program you put in place, it can take quite a few months to start, putting things in place, start looking at a strategy, bespoking things, and really kind of start seeing something moving. But with the mystery shopping, it's quite instant, isn't it?
It is, but it has to be done on the basis of having a robust customer journey. And I've seen a lot of programs built based on that kind of introspective view. And without mapping the journey effectively, the mystery shop only really touches on a few of the touch points that people know about. And it might just be the hot topics that customer is aware, that client is aware of at that point of time. But actually there may be other things in that process that are preventing their employees delivering the things that are affecting that result. So there does need to be a degree of mapping the customer journey as it is, mapping it as you'd like it to be, and then measuring pre and post to look at the closing that gap.
Yeah, definitely.
And that for me is a key way of getting it to work. So there is a degree of instantaneous response, but that's really just this is how it is now. But it has to be followed up with other evolutions in CX to make it have more value than if it was just a check and balance.
And so, I mean, obviously Retail Eye has become quite a large organization by the time you kind of left. How many mystery shoppers did you have, on your books, and how did you maintain consistency? So you must have had thousands of people on your books.
It was, it exploded. I think we had at one point over 300,000 registered shoppers. And to be fair, of which 75 to 80,000 were active.
Wow.
Which again, you see sometimes panels are only as big as sort of 30 or 40,000, and you've got a few hundred that are active. And the reason they were active is because we rotated them really well. We had a very, now it feels fairly basic, but at the time it was, we profiled the shoppers really tightly. Actually asked them to put in quite a lot of effort when they signed up in order to give us the right way of profiling the visits. We were very careful to rotate people through. We didn't want people to do too many visits for the same retailer, because we felt that would impact the quality of the findings. And then people get too used to doing that visit. So they stop looking for, or they look for what they think they should be looking for, not what they actually see. So it became important to rotate people through and not allow people to do too many visits. And you can only achieve that if you've got the depth within the panel. So was it 2000? So Retail Eye started 2003, 2005. Facebook kind of got onto the scene. You had the Mystery Shopper Forum. That you had quite limited ways of recruiting. We were placing ads in local newspapers, particularly in places like Stranraer and those regions that are just almost impossible to get to.
Jersey.
Handful of people. But again, it's right. Not every retailer has outlets in those places, but you know damn well that the retailers that are significant in size will have an outlet in your hardest to reach areas. So it was important that we had enough people within a reasonable distance to be able to rotate them through. There's no point sending a pensioner to a nightclub. It's that type of thing. You have to match the profile of the shopper. Don't get me wrong. I've seen some grannies in a nightclub giving it everything they can, and it's good fun. But it's not your typical customer. So it's about not sticking out, and it's about blending in, but being able to take that information away.
What would the best characteristic you reckon would be to be a mystery shopper?
I think ultimately the ability to read and understand the instructions and to follow them, not necessarily 100%, but enough to be able to go through the motions without having to constantly check instructions. I think if people pull out bits of paper when they're in a store, then staff get quite suspicious. And go back, just 3 or 4 years, there was this whole, can I take a photo in a store? And people on their phone, you just took your phone out to take a photo of a shelf or something, and people are like, what are you doing? And there's this whole mental barrier about, this isn't right. But now it's just normal. People are on their phones constantly. So it's much easier to get some of that information that you wouldn't have perhaps found as easy previously. But in terms of the type of shopper, it's really about, can they follow the instruction closely enough? And when they feed back, when they're completing their report, are they giving enough richness in that information? Are they telling you not just, yes, it was there, I saw that, or are they really looking to give you information that says, and you don't mind if it's opinion, it's dosed with a bit of opinion. It's really about, what did you observe? What happened? What did somebody do? How did they react? And you say, how did it make you feel?
Mm.
And yeah, did it put you at ease? Did you feel that they were genuine in asking you whether you needed help? Did they listen to you? So all of those types of things that actually add real value to the reporting,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you need from the mystery shopper. If somebody just fills in 3 or 4 word answers to responses,
Mm.
that's no good. Yeah, that becomes your check and balance. And you know, it has its place. But for me, that wasn't the value that the mystery shopping we were trying to do was going to be achieved. So we built things into our software that prevented people from only leaving so many characters.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be careful because sometimes there isn't a lot to say on certain questions. So you have to mix the type of question with the type of character limits that you want to put in. And then the rest is simple. Just make sure that spelling and grammar is easy, so the proofreaders aren't having to fully edit, because the more they edit, the more they potentially take away from how you're explaining the experience.
Mm-hmm. The authenticity of it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, very interesting. Thank you. That's I think that's a big important part of it. It's really that having that wide range of different demographic and different people, which brings that real flavor to it. I mean, although you get different scenarios and you get different things that when they're going in, but being able to see it from different points of view, different levels. When it's children and family, you have a different views completely to what's what happened to an older generation. So it's really important to have that kind of mixture.
Yeah, and I think also to recruit beyond what started off as predominantly female panels. That was all the starting point for many, because it's if you go back 15, 20 years when you have that more traditional sort of housing setup where you've got a housewife at home who's got some time to go out and do a mystery visit. That's great, but it's not the rounded view. That's not your whole shopper base. So from our perspective in Retail Eyes, we work really hard to recruit a really balanced panel, not just socioeconomic groups, but also gender balance, and look at different types of education. We would pick out all of these things as part of that profiling in order to then make sure we were able to get the right person to do the right visit. And that was important because you wanted to understand what the core customer was, and then to be able to make sure that you replicated that in the mystery visit.
So what does ParadigmCX does? What do you do now? You're not Retail Eye anymore. How do you help businesses now?
So I'm in between Retail Eyes and where I am now. I moved into sort of running voice of customer for a global market research agency, and then I reintroduced mystery shopping for them in the UK. And then got involved in mystery shopping across the EMEA region, and really started to drive the understanding for their business leaders on what that could be and should be doing for them, and started to get that moving. So when that for me finished and I moved into setting my own business up, I wanted to continue that level of education and development of customer strategy for clients, and help them think more about customer focus, but also then to combine the tools that were available. So the mystery shopping and the voice of customer are clearly highly integrated elements of getting that rounded perspective. So in order to create a strategy, you have to understand the purpose of the business, but you also have to understand who your target audience is, who your customer is, and is it the same customer that you think it is? And one of the things that we identified with one of our clients, even at Retail, was it was a fashion retailer, and they had set their stall out at young, trendy surf people. And do you know what? They spent a lot of time advertising and looking at people with, VW campers and surfboards, and then flip season, you'd see people on the side of mountains in ski gear, and it was all 18 to 24-year-old models in the photo shoot. That was their target audience. But when we started to look at it for them, actually, no, it wasn't. the target audience was not the audience that was actually buying their product, because their product, you know, a polo shirt was 45, 50 pounds. So the people who could afford that were, guess what, you know, kids had flown the nest, they're in their mid 40s and still wanted to feel young. And it was that 45 to 55 age range that were the actual customer buying the product. Now, they didn't necessarily need to change how they were advertising, because it made that audience want that product. But they could suddenly start saying, well, let's not just put adverts in FHM and GQ. Let's start putting, you know, in, you know, town and country, and same type of ad, but in a slightly different readership audience. And all of a sudden that starts to expand. So I think that for me is one of the things that, from a ParadigmCX perspective, is help companies understand who their audience is, share how customer experience can benefit them both internally as part of process, but also in terms of the relationship with their customer and their engagement, and then look at the processes that they've put in place. Yeah, how enabled are their staff and their employees to be able to do the job that they've been asked to do anyway, but how do you enable them and empower them to be able to make those changes to then deliver to that customer experience that the customer expects. So it's a broad brush in some respects, but it comes from that deep-seated kind of researchy sort of perspective of, if we don't have enough information, and, yeah, one of my quotes is almost, without data, insight is just opinion. You know, and it might be a valid opinion, but it's not validated. And it's about making sure that we've got enough information, enough touch points, and some validity on what we're then going to make potentially a fairly sizable business decision on. So understand the purpose, what are we trying to offer, and can we deliver it through our teams and our staff? And how do we inform the entire business at each of those points to be able to make the right decisions?
Excellent. Well, this is just amazing. I mean, we're just so on the same kind of aligned with the same kind of vision, and it is, you know, I think we've there's been a bigger and bigger kind of CX community over the last, you know, few months or years, I guess, you know, and it's really amazing how we can, you know, all the different tools now and all the techniques and all the inside out. Everybody brings something a little bit different, isn't it, to the business. So if people want to find you, how do they get in touch with you?
So ParadigmCX.com or Nick@ParadigmCX.com. If you want to email me, I'm freely available on LinkedIn and the usual social channels. I'm lucky, like yourself, to have a fairly unusual name. So there's not 50 Nick Lygo-Bakers, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, no, usual channels, I'm usually available. Excellent.
And you also have been part of a book, haven't you? The customer experience too. That's, you know, a little project that you've done again as a team.
Yes, I think one of the, is it a benefit to the lockdown? I guess. So obviously when things went on pause, for me, it was a chance to just sit back and say, well, I've never written anything down other than customer reports. And I'm sure some of my former clients go, yeah, they were interesting, or maybe not. But actually there's a lot that I just needed and wanted to share. So the opportunity to write about that in a collaborative book on CX was too good an opportunity to miss. So my part in that was to look at responsibility and accountability, and how things are adopted into organizations. Because I think that's still one of the biggest challenges for CX. I think because it sits, as I say, between marketing, operations, HR, it needs to be firmly on the radar of the CEO for most organizations. It's still, because it's such a broad brush, quite hard to really articulate to people who sit in companies with those traditional structures, because this doesn't really naturally sit as one of those pillars. And that's the challenge that I and all of my CX colleagues face, and that's something that we are evolving and working through. But I think also the opportunity to put that into to writing was a chance to say, look, this is some really high caliber collective thinking on how customer experience can benefit you. It's not just here's a few examples. Some of these are real case studies that have been put into that book, and it was a privilege to be working on it with some other really high caliber, renowned influences within the CX world, sharing how their experience and how their CX programs have worked as well.
Excellent. Right. Well, we'll put the details of the book as well. So if anybody wants to download it, you'll be able to do that under this video. Nick, thank you. Thank you so much for being with me today, and wishing you all the best. Some exciting new project coming on. And thanks for sharing all that mystery shopping insight as well. I'm sure there'll be lots more that you'll be doing. And perhaps a new book on mystery shopping or something like that could be an exciting part. Maybe you and I could do something together.
Who knows? I think that's, certainly on the cards. I think it'll be good to start looking at how mystery shopping's evolved and how it's important,
that's
influencing business.
Sounds like a plan. All right, then. Bye, Nick. Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.